How could a woman allow another man to rob you of your identity?
So I met him when I was 19. 3 weeks before I met him, I was raped. And so my identity was already taken.
When did things started going downhill?
Really not too long after we said I do, there was an issue with him, going to see a woman, get a haircut by a woman that he had a relationship with, a sexual relationship with. And I blew up on him, and I did not use biblical words. So I got to a point where I called him out on it, and he was like, "You don't know what you're talking about." And I was like, "I'm not crazy." So
You felt that he made
Yeah.
you feel like you're crazy.
Yes, well, several times. And I'm like,
Sometimes
okay.
men can do that.
Yeah,
Right.
and I can't say that every aspect of the marriage was horrible. And so those little things that we did, the time that we spent, the trips that we took,
Right,
the places we went with friends and all of that.
Here's a big question. Do you regret marrying him? Welcome to the podcast. In this life where challenges and hardships often test our very core, it is the strength within us that allows us to rise above adversity. Today, we have the privilege of hearing from a remarkable woman who have been through some real tough situations and have endured unimaginable pain. Yet she emerged from it all with strength that defies all odds. Let me introduce to you DaNaia Jackson, a new friend of the podcast. Welcome, DaNaia.
Thank you so much, Bishop Henry, for allowing me to come on. I'm super excited to be here, so thank you.
Glad to have you. And one of the reasons why I brought you on was because, of course, you blew up on social media.
Yes.
Right? And there's a lot of people watching the podcast today may not be familiar with who you are. So we're going to talk about, of course, later, this successful woman, this woman who has found her confidence.
Yes.
But there are people who I believe who are currently where you were. How was life then when you found your boyfriend then who became your husband?
Yes, so life was confused for me, to be honest. So there was a lot going on. I was pregnant with our first daughter right before we got engaged. And so we were not even technically together before we got engaged. I was pregnant, but we were not in a relationship. And, he was doing his own thing and I was doing my own thing. And so it was a confusing time. And so when we're going into engagement at this point, it was just like, are we gonna do something or not? And it was never a conversation that we had to say, oh, we're back together and we're gonna raise this kid together. It was just like implied that we're back together. And I think that's the danger that so many people get into, because you have this person that you have been in a relationship with, maybe even for years, on and off. You feel like, oh, that's my soulmate. I need to marry, I'm going to marry them. You kind of reserve yourself for them in case whatever else they have going on doesn't work out. And so then you get yourself into engagement and then marriage, and you never did the work to really come together as one, how you need to, and work out those issues that will present itself in marriage. And so I would say it was confusing at that point.
And you're actually speaking to a lot of people, not just women, but men, because at the beginning of a relationship, sometimes it's very difficult for people to define who they are and what's the purpose of that relationship.
Yes.
So what I'm hearing from you is simply this: you met this guy and it looks like nothing was really defined.
No, there was no definition.
How did that happen? I mean, because a lot of women, this from a man's perspective, right? Most women, I'm thinking that when you see a guy, you either love him
or you don't.
And you don't. How do you enter into a relationship at the beginning without clarity?
So we met when we were 19, and so I feel like we just had a high school mentality. My idea of relationships and marriage was based off of a Disney Channel movie. So seriously, right? And I know it sounds ridiculous, but
it's true.
It is true,
Right.
right? So my idea of love and relationship was based off of what I seen on TV, Disney Channel, because that was my favorite TV station. And so when I got old enough, in my mind, oh, this is how relationships go. It's going to be like, one of those shows on TV, and it was completely the opposite. And so now I'm like, what do I do now? And then when I'm looking at the people around me, like in my family or friend circle, like everybody has broken relationships. So is that what it looks like? So I'm basing all of my actions for relationship and my thoughts about relationship based off of everything that I'm seeing. And it took me years to realize that everything that I was watching as a child and from like my parents and people around me with relationships and then TV shaped all of my experiences or all of my thoughts and perceptions about love, relationships, and marriage. And I didn't know how damaging the effects of that was until I was well into marriage. And I didn't even know what to call it.
Looking back now, if you had to go back to the time you said you got pregnant, you weren't married yet.
No.
Looking back now, what would you have done differently?
I would have taken some time to like figure out like what I need in that moment. I was too worried about people pleasing. Like I wanted to please him. I wanted to please my just like the people around me. Like I'm in a relationship, a marriage, I wanted to almost show up my family in some sense as well, because nobody really married the person that they had kids with, and so look at me, I'm gonna marry the person I have kids with, and I didn't know myself. And so I would have taken some time back to really figure out like, how did I get myself in this situation? Do I really am I really in love? Because when I think about it, I was in so much distress just during that pregnancy time and then leading up into the engagement that I never dealt with it. I suppressed it, and then I was like, oh, I'm getting a ring. So yes, I like none of that matters. So everything is good now, and it was not.
Here's a big question. Do you regret marrying him? Hi there, this is Henry Fernandez, and I just want to take this time to say a big thanks to all of you who watch my podcast. You guys are really awesome. If you haven't already, please make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you can stay in the loop for the next episode. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. So let's keep the good vibes going, my friends, and continue our journey of growth and inspiration together. Stay tuned, my real ones. Do you regret marrying him?
No, I don't. I feel like if I did not go through those set of experiences, I would not carry the anointing that I have now on my life. And so when
That's the blessing when it comes to trauma.
Yes.
That you can extract a blessing through a traumatic situation.
Exactly.
That's awesome for you to say that, because a lot of women would say, yeah, God, was the biggest mistake I made. I never want to relive that. But to you, you believe you've evolved into a different woman.
Yes, absolutely. And that's because we have to go through experiences and then call on the Lord as we're going through that and realize that everything that we're doing and all these life experiences are tests. How are we going to respond to that? And so now that I've gone through this traumatic experience, I have the experience to be able to minister to someone and say, I know exactly what you're thinking, how you're feeling, and I can pinpoint it out. So in the previous things that I've done, when I said I knew her body better than I knew my own, millions of women resonated with that. And they didn't have words to put to it, but the Lord anointed me with the words to put to it, because I passed the test of getting through that and leaning on him to be able to articulate and give those people a voice who have been voiceless and don't even have words to put to it.
That's powerful that, there's no regrets to that, because I wasn't expecting that answer, to be honest with you.
Okay.
What would you say then now that you confess that, look, wasn't planning to really get married, it just happened, right? Were there any good times in the marriage?
Yes, absolutely. We
Okay.
had a lot of just like personal times where we would laugh and just spend quality time together. And I feel like those were the things that kept me there,
There, right.
And I can't say that every aspect of the marriage was horrible. And so those little things that we did, the time that we spent, the trips that we took,
Right,
the places we went with friends and all of that. So
When did things started going downhill?
really not too long after we said I do.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and to be honest, a little bit
Really?
before that, because there was an issue with him, going to see a woman, get a haircut by a woman that he had a sexual relationship with. And I like blew up on him, and I did not use biblical words. So that was not in my language. And,
All right, you're being human.
yes. And so, we went into marriage 3 weeks after that experience. We never really dealt with it.
Slow down.
Yeah.
Let me see if I'm getting this right. That happened before marriage.
That happened before marriage.
I thought it
3
was
weeks.
after.
No, that happened 3 weeks before our marriage.
You realized that he was not faithful.
Yeah, and
But what made you still go through?
I
the
love the
marriage?
idea of marriage and relationship more than I knew anything about love and like marriage and relationship. Like I just love the idea of it more. Like I can look back and think about that now, but at the time
It was just the institution of marriage.
right. And I'm like, I have to get married. I have a kid, a baby now, because I was pregnant,
Right.
and then leading into our marriage, I was pregnant again with our second child. So it was a lot going on. I'm not about to raise these kids by myself.
Right.
So it was all those factors playing into it. I don't want to be shamed and like feel this guilt because I'm out here doing whatever I want to do, pregnant with 2 kids now,
Right.
and not be married
Right.
at the end of it.
So he was unfaithful, and you blew up. You still went ahead with the marriage.
Yes.
It sounds as if you've lost yourself in loving him.
I did, and that happened even before we actually got into marriage. So we have to think. We met at 19. We got engaged when we were 26, 27, 28, and so there's some years in between that. But I had already lost myself by the time engagement and marriage came along. But I was so desperate just to have something, to hold on to,
Right.
that I was just like,
Do you
this
think
has to go.
if it hadn't been him, maybe there would be nobody else?
I felt like that at the time. I felt like nobody else would want me, and then there's this stigma out there. If you have a kid,
Right.
Nobody's gonna want you anymore. You're used goods. You can only get a certain type of guy, and good luck with that.
DaNaia, it's interesting that all of what you felt in the marriage, the rejection, the losing yourself, because we're going to talk a little bit about that. The
Yes.
woman you have become today,
Whew.
it's like, why couldn't you been that woman back then? So,
Yeah.
this is good stuff.
Yes.
Right? Let's do it layer on layer. But for me, you knew that this gentleman, and there's a lot of women out there
Right.
who can connect to your story.
Right.
Fine, he's the father of your children, but he was unfaithful, everything, but you went in there and you see the thing I want to zero in on, you lost your identity.
And
How could a woman allow another man to rob you of your identity?
So we have to go back, right? So I met him when I was 19. 3 weeks before I met him, I was raped. And so my identity was already taken, right? So this person decided that they were going to do whatever they wanted to do, violated my person, and took something that most women can't even, there's not a word or anything that you could really describe it from, but it's really a violation. They stole my virtue. And so I already lost a part of my identity of what I had in the after that. And then I was silent on it for 12 years, overall 12 years. Derek didn't find out about it until like 5 years after knowing each other. And so my identity had already been robbed by a man. And so in that experience, so it was easy to let another man rob my identity even more, because that's all I'm worth. That was my worth and my value. This is what's normal. This is how relationships are supposed to go.
Wow.
And this is that's part of trauma. Everything around you, spiritually, emotionally, affects your ability to connect not only with people but with God and how you view things. So
right. Wow. So you've lost your identity, yes, and there's a video that went viral.
Yes.
Where I guess when something was about to make public with him, your ex-husband, and I watched the video, and the woman I saw next to him looks like she was very uncomfortable. I want to know if were there any time in this journey, in this marriage, that you felt, I got to get out, but didn't get out?
Yes, often.
And why?
I actually left the marriage for 8 months and went to Denver and stayed with my mom. And so I left and I came back to the marriage against, people wise counsel at the time. They were like, I don't think you should go back too prematurely.
So they told you not to?
Yeah, and I did it anyway. I'm grown. I could do what I want,
Right.
I'm married, so I could do what I want. But I think I came back prematurely. And so there were several times in that where I was like, I have to get out of this. But then I felt like since I came back, I had to ask God for like, how do I navigate this? Help me to get out of this, or expose something that is going to get me out of this, again. And I promise I'm not going to look back this time. And so I kept on asking the Lord, like, help me, expose something, tell me what's going on. And he did that all the way to the finish. So people don't know that I was doing some prayers. I was conflicted a lot. I wanted to leave, but I felt like I couldn't leave. And so I was just like, Lord, help me to just get through this stage of this process, because I don't know if I could survive this. And so that was how that went.
So there are women watching right now, and they're probably living your story.
Yes.
Would you say to them, don't make the mistake you made by staying, get out, and how? Because it sounds like, you love this guy. You don't sound like a woman. I think, you were into him.
Yes.
But then sometimes you have to use wisdom.
Right.
That though you're into a person, if they're taking your identity away, your womanhood, if you will, then you have to make a decision, because it's self-survival. How to survive the trauma. You've been through rape, an unfaithful relationship, being in a home that you're not happy, all of that, and you survived it. But there's another woman watching. What would you say to her? Because she may not survive.
That's true. I would say that if you are in this relationship and you are more concerned about how your spouse or your partner feels, then it's time for you to take a step back from that relationship, whether that's you leaving for some time or whatever you have to do. But I had to learn when I was there that I was idolizing him. And I was idolizing him, and I wanted to please him more than I wanted to please God. And I had to work through that, through this whole process to where I'm at right now. But I had to work through that, and I had to renounce that. And so, but for those women that are listening, I would say, if you feel like that you are trying to please and serve your spouse, more than you are focused on trying to get right, like with God and pleasing God first, then that person is an idol in your life, and you have to remove yourself for some time and get yourself together and examine yourself in that area before you can enter back into a relationship.
Well,
So
you had mentioned to me that with him, that you would see him love on other women or do stuff
Yes.
for other women that you wish he had done for you. So therefore, what you did, you would study what they're doing
yes,
and try to give him that.
try to mimic that rejection and
Wow.
abandonment, right? And so we're talking about undealt with trauma for years with the rape. So now I'm just like, how do I keep this person that I feel like I'm really in love with, and I have to do all of these things because he's gravitating to that. So now I have to compete. I feel pulled to compete. Not that he's necessarily saying that, but
you're
I feel pulled to compete. And why is that? And it's because, again, I don't have any identity in myself. I didn't even have boundaries and barriers, and I didn't even know what that was. And so apparently a lot of people don't know what that is. And so they get themselves in these relationships, don't have any boundaries and barriers. They're not having certain types of conversations to have healthy communication and say, hey, these things bother me, and then allow the person to either respect it and or not, and then make a decision on what you're going to do. Like, that's not taught. We're not taught that. So I had to figure that out, like,
Wow.
during the process. And I think that if we focus as a whole on teaching people, okay, what are boundaries and barriers? If somebody does not respect what you say that you're uncomfortable with or you are comfortable with, then you have to make a decision, be strong enough within yourself to say, you're not respecting this. I've told you this multiple times. So now I have to remove myself essentially from the equation, and I wasn't strong enough to do that for years.
Wow. In the next podcast, we're going to talk about the woman now versus the woman back then.
Yes.
But I want to touch a little bit on that. You seem to have found your who you are.
Yes.
You have discovered the woman that God placed inside of you. I watched your videos, some of them,
Yes.
And I'm looking at the woman today versus the woman who was with the man. How did that evolution take place?
That 8 months that I was away from him, well, I needed all of that rest and recovery.
It took you to leave him.
It took me to leave him.
So what were you doing all this time? I'm thinking being with someone that is the environment that fosters growth and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Walk me through that.
So when I left for the 8 months, I was in a recovery stage, essentially. Like, I was just able to breathe. I didn't have to think about performing for him or for anybody else. I could just be my ugly self in that moment, whether that was like ugly cry or whatever. I had people that would help me with the kids, but I couldn't do that in the environment that I was in. And so that time I utilized to study the word. Every single day I was in the word, watching every pastor I know online, learning the word. I was going to one-on-one Bible studies to work through some of the spiritual aspects of like what I was going through and unpacking that. At the same time, I was going through actual clinical therapy at the same time to start uncovering some things. So all of those were seeds planted in that time. And so when I came back, I already had some recovery time, and then knowing, okay, this is who I am. I already had some seeds that in confidence of who I was going back into the relationship. So as I'm going through the relationship this time, I have boundaries and barriers, and now I'm enforcing them. And when they're not being respected, I'm saying, hey, this is a problem, and I'm standing up for it, and I'm not backing down, which just caused more stuff. But I am practicing that, standing up for my boundaries repetitively, being assertive with my communication. I was developing the woman that's sitting here right
Wow.
here with you now, because I had to go back and prove that I can stand up to someone that I really feared, and then I was trying to people please, and so and set my boundaries and barriers and who I am, and if they couldn't respect it, then it is what it is. But that's why I'm able to sit here and do what I'm doing now, because I practiced it through the fire for the time that I came back.
Wow. Wow. Do you believe that when the timing is right, marriage would be something that you would consider again?
Yes,
Okay.
I do
And what
believe
should
that.
this man look like, be like? For you to say, I've done that. Now, for me to do it the second time, these are my non-negotiable things.
Yes. So I don't have like a physical appearance type of thing. I feel like I've grown out of that, and I think that's part of this process. When we look at the outside cover, we miss a lot of stuff that is internal. And do you really want to deal with that when you say I do, right? Because
Right.
you have to work through with that person. And so now I want to know, like, what is your relationship with God, and how can I see that? How is that how is that manifested and proven in your life?
Right.
Like, I want to see that. What have you already learned from past relationships and things like that has shifted and pushed you not only closer to God, but made you a better man? And then how can you help me to be a better woman from where I'm at right now?
Right.
To
Right.
to push me to be better through the marriage. And so I want to know more of the intellectual aspect and your relationship with God, what you've learned about yourself. What are your toxic traits? Do you know that? Can you tell me that? Or, and like, what are you trying to work out? Those things are important. So then when we get into marriage, then we already have some things that we're working on. I accept you for who you are and what all you're coming with and what you're trying to grow into. You know who I am. You know what I'm coming from and who I'm trying to grow into. And then we can move forward together from there.
Right.
So
The reason why I ask you that, and you responded, by saying you're going to really check his spiritual life,
Yes.
which is important. But you do know even guys in the church
yes, they do.
who
And
have flaws, have
Yes.
issues. So how do you, beyond the spiritual, how do you then know? Because if a guy, let's say a year from now, a gentleman comes and he says, look, I like you, whatever, let's date, and he's in the church, he could be in the church 20 years, whatever, but he could be a snake.
yeah, so I got some words of wisdom from my spiritual father. He said that you need to see how that man reacts when somebody dies in his family or around him, when finances are not where they need to be,
Right.
when there's crisis in his life. How is he responding when he's upset? How is he responding and treating you? Because those things will be the signs to say, oh, it'll show you who that man is, his character is when there's hard times, and then you can make a decision from that. So before I'm saying yes to any type of engagement or anything, I need to see some of those seasons and how you're responding and how you're reacting, because that's going to tell me a lot about who you are as a
Right.
man, and if I want to deal with that or not.
Right,
So-
right. So, you mentioned that when you started dating your husband,
Yes.
and so forth, you you knew it was kind of like not the right environment or situation for
Yeah,
you to be in,
yeah.
but you went ahead and you did it. What are some of the mistakes that you can check off that will help women who are watching now?
Yes. So
Guys too, what are some of the things that you like, I'll not do that again.
yes.
Not do that again.
Yeah, so looking at the nature of the relationship, we had a lot of on and off agains, and like, why was that?
How did that happen? I want you to go
Yes.
through the list, but
Yes.
on and off, how did you allow that?
I felt like that was normal. I really got everybody is doing that. This is not something that is new or one-off. Like literally everybody in my age group or probably older or
that.
younger is doing that. It's okay to be on and off.
So you
again.
thought it was normal.
Right. And so I thought it was normal. The songs are talking about it too, out there. So it's like, oh, next one, and then we could come back if we feel like it,
Wow.
And so looking at the nature of the relationship though, how are we doing this on and off again thing? And then why is that? I would really go back and examine that. I feel like that was a mistake.
Right.
For me to not go back and think like, is this a relationship that actually is fulfilling me or making me happy? Next, I would learn about boundaries and barriers. I didn't know anything about boundaries and barriers. And so I feel like there needs to be some education on boundaries and barriers. And
what are some of those boundaries?
So I need to be heard. It's important that I'm heard, not that I'm trying to talk over, but I need somebody who can listen to me and not try to talk over me. And that was a scenario that happened a lot in my relationship. So
you were not heard.
I was not heard, and I was talked over. When I began to talk, something was said, and then and so it's important that I'm heard. And so that's a boundary that I have. Like, I need to be heard. I'm not asking for you to agree with me on what I'm saying. I just want you to hear me and then respond from that place.
Do you believe that the way you voiced your opinion and spoke, that it wasn't in a way to trigger him to respond in a negative way? And the reason why I asked that, because I'm going back to what you were saying. When you found out he did his thing, you went,
oh yeah, yes. So there was
sometimes women, sometimes their mouth and their, I'm not saying, so ladies, please don't attack me now.
Sometimes we're like, hey, no. So it was a process to grow out of that. So
so you admit that you were doing that.
I was doing that in the beginning of the marriage. I was definitely doing that. When I came back after the 8 months, I wasn't doing that. I was practicing being assertive. I had coaches and people helping me to do so. So I would come and calmly and just, hey, this is an issue for me, and it was not respected. And so I would come back and do it again, and it's not respected. And so now I have to put up a barrier, and that barrier is like, this absolutely cannot happen, otherwise we have like a bigger issue and we need to go to a third party at this point. And so
was he willing?
No.
Why? Was it because you think of pride, or because I mean, he was popular on social media.
Yes, everybody knew who he was and is.
Very seldom people didn't know much about you because you were never in the picture.
Yes,
and so forth. And he was popular. So why?
Well, he was popular because he utilized a lot of those things, like in our relationship. A lot of things he talked about, me and him had just had those discussions, or we had just had that experience. But then he would get online and say, oh, a friend of mine or people that he knows.
Oh, so he was using.
But it was about our relationship. Wow. And for a long time, I picked up on aspects of it, but I never voiced it to anybody. And then
did you want to address it?
I did, and I got to a point where I called him out on it, and he was like, "You don't know what you're talking about," like. And I was like, I'm not crazy. So
you felt that he made you feel like you're crazy.
Yes, well, several times. And I'm like,
sometimes men can do that.
Yeah.
And
I think it's just a thing. But yeah, a lot of times I'm like, am I? And so I started doubting myself. And am I able to comprehend things and put two things together? I did a lot of that. But I'm like, no, we just had this conversation. And now you're talking about it using different names on the internet. Like, how does that work? And so it was just a whole process with that, but he didn't feel that he was doing that. So
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So we just got a few more minutes here. First of all, I really wanted to thank you for being so candid and open.
Yes.
Because I really think there are people, especially women,
they need to
watching,
hear it.
They're actually seeing themselves through you. Obviously it looks like you've been a healed woman, a woman that's been healed.
Yes.
Because you're speaking with confidence. There's no shame in your game.
None.
You've used your life experiences as your testimony, if you will,
Yes.
to get you to where you are. But I really want to close off with the whole concept of, some of the life lessons you've learned through this experience and so forth. For men now, help us. Talk to us. What if a man would say, pertaining to your husband, that one of the reasons why he did all the messy, crappy stuff he did is because you were out of place. You did not take care of your man.
Okay.
And yeah, he might have did whatever. You caused him to go outside as a woman.
Yes.
What's the answer?
I would say that you have to understand your wife, because when you understand your wife, and if my husband had understood me, then
There was no need for him to go
then
outside.
there was no there would be no that conversation. There would be no, oh, you're not pleasing him, or you're not doing what you need to do to take care of him, because we're looking at me and what I came with in the relationship, and that was rape and undealt with rape. And that means that there's going to be issues sexually with that. So now it's on you to take leadership as the head, and now help me to, or help your wife process though whatever issues she may be having. Now everybody doesn't have that experience, but
Right.
I'm just saying, understand the experiences that your wife has gone through and maybe that has not dealt with.
Right.
And then
So
from
the wife
that,
must be honest from the get-go.
right, she has to get to a point where she's honest.
Right.
But when she is honest, understanding her from that space, and then looking at how she's making decisions, how she's thinking and communicating with you from that lens of her experience, which is going to bring that compassion for her and you actually understanding her. So sometimes I know guys are more like logical, like this doesn't make sense, and or analytical, but you really have to practice understanding your wife and the experiences that she has gone through
Right.
in her life, because that's the lens that she's making the decisions that she's making, or she's speaking the way that she's speaking. And if you don't like it, then we're like, okay, help her to go through a process, or start going through the process, whatever resources she needs to begin to go through that process, which shows her that you care for her, and that will be corrected.
Do you
over
believe
time.
sometimes, men who cheat and do certain things, do you believe, as some in the medical community says, it's a medical condition, it's a psychological issue, or what? I know we're not doctors, so
Yes.
we can't, but
Yeah, I'm not a doctor, but I don't think that it's a medical situation. I think it's spiritual, and I think that they're very sick and broken, just like anybody else who has gone through something is sick and broken, and that's just a manifestation of the spiritual aspect. And then you have the mental aspect, or the
Right.
clinical aspect of it, where they think that that's okay. They're conditioned to think that. So now, as a man thinks, so is he. So he's going to behave in that way, because
Right.
that's how he's thinking.
Right.
But I think that there's more to it than just like a medical
Wow.
condition.
Wow.
So
Let's end with this. So, because the next podcast we're going to deal with this woman who has evolved,
Yes.
right? So I want to end with the idea of, it happened, you left the marriage and so forth. What was your lowest moment in that season when everything came crushing down? Because I know, look at you
Yes.
today, you're looking all well put together, everything, but there had to be a moment when you didn't have the hair, didn't have the glasses, didn't have the makeup on, and you felt you were going to die.
that viral video that everybody is listen, I got so much flack over that video. She was on the camera looking a mess. You just let her get on there. That was me showing up.
Because you told me this. You said when you purposely did that, because that was the raw you.
That was the raw me.
Wow.
Because I had practiced being other women and doing the hair and the makeup and the nice clothes just to please him or please the people around me. And I decided I was going to show up as me for the first time. And I showed up as me, and people, they hated that.
Yeah.
But it was a test for me. It was a personal test for me and God. Am I going to show up and be who God told me that I am, and not think and care about what everybody else's viewpoint about what I look like?
For you.
Right. So it was liberating for me, but it was not that great for the public. But it was me and me doing that. And these first couple of years, they didn't see me in makeup. They didn't see my hair done or straight. They didn't see me in fancy clothes. I was on the internet with, whatever I had. So that was the thing that showed me up as me. That's what I did.
Well,
so.
I love it. I love it because when I saw the video, I'm of course, it's like, and most women know the truth is, I mean, if somebody was come to knock at your door when you didn't get dressed, didn't have the makeup on and so forth, they'd be like, is she inside there?
Right. Yes, yes.
But that day you just decided,
I'm going to show up as me. And I was pregnant with our third child. I was pregnant at that time. So I'm dealing with for real trauma, and I have global, because it's going viral around the globe. I don't have the capacity to sit with makeup on and all this stuff to please people. You're going to I'm going to look a mess with cute earrings and a cute shirt on. No, I'm going to show up as me. And I called on that helmet of salvation, and here I am.
Right. That changed your life because you unmasked yourself.
Yes.
And that's really what I want to really leave with all of you who are watching the podcast. Life circumstances will allow you, if you allow the Holy Spirit to birth that in you, to unmask all of the stuff we try to put on ourselves that doesn't make us who we are. Let's be honest. Many of us, we're broken. We're coming from a place of hurt. And like DaNaia just said, that, prior to her marriage, she's been raped. I wonder how many of you have been raped, maybe not physically by the opposite sex, but maybe you've been raped, emotionally, your dignity, of who you are. There's hope. You can recover from trauma. You can become this woman or man of God that God has called you to be if you just purpose in your heart, man, to just say, look, you know what? My pain can be my gain, and just be yourself. Be you. Be authentically yourself. I mean, that video that went viral, perhaps, one thing with social media, it's the crazy stuff that go viral,
Right.
So she just said, I'm going to unmask. And perhaps today, you just need to unmask, be real. Maybe you're in a bad relationship, a relationship that's hurting, a bad marriage, whatever you're going through. Let this woman's testimony give you hope that you can just rest assured that God can bring you out of that situation. DaNaia, thank you so much
for
sharing this amazing story with the people who follow me on my platform. So don't miss part 2 as we continue to explore DaNaia's path towards healing. Together, we will uncover even deeper layers of her story and glean valuable insights, if you will, get valuable insights that will inspire us to forge our own paths to greatness, to help us to be resilient, if you will, in becoming our best self. Again, thank you so much for watching this podcast. I can't wait, man, for part 2. I'll see you next time.
Yay.
Was divorce for you liberating or regrettable?
With the Affair Partners went public, we're at the funeral the day that they are going public, and it's going viral.
You were considering working things out.
But it was a melting pot of emotions. I was furious. I wanted to, not do some things that are not godly. It's heartbreaking when I'm looking at my children and they don't have their father. They're asking, why aren't we in the same house?
How do you handle that?
So I'm still trying to navigate it.